Visit www.flaskup.com for all your Mr. Pandaria raiding guide needs. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10-man normal mode version of the Council of Elders in the Throne of Thunder raid. Now in order to complete this fight we use 2 tanks, 2 healers and 6 DPS. However, if your healing is a little bit off you can always opt for 3 healers and 5 DPS. Now, as you can probably see, this encounter consists of 4 different mobs which do not share a health pool. They individually have around 87 million health, and 3 of the mobs are tanked and 1 of them just roams around freely. Now, we'll speak a little bit more about the tanking later on because we managed to make it so you can only tank 2, which does make the fight considerably easier. So the main kind of aspect of this fight is the fact that Garagel the Spirit Binder is back. However, he's not back in a physical form, he's come back as a ghost to haunt everybody for killing him. Now, the Spirit of Garagel will possess the 4 different mobs around the room one at a time, and this is key to this fight, because when he does possess them, you've got to deal 25% damage equal to their maximum health. And by doing this, it will then force the Spirit of Garagel out of the current one into the next one. And this is pretty much the mechanic of the fight that you have to deal with the most. Now, when Garagel has been forced out of one spirit by taking 25% damage, he will leave a debuff on that, well, it's more of a buff actually, on that mob called Lingering Presence, and this will increase all the damage that that mob does by 10%, and it will also increase the rate that dark energy is generated by 10% for the remainder of the fight. So as you can probably imagine, as the fight goes on, more damage is being put out and it does get a little bit harder. Now, the Dark Power is what will be an energy bar on each council member, and this will only start to increase when they have been possessed by Garagel. And if the Dark Power meter reaches 100, then they will begin to inflict raid-wide damage every second. And it's not very nice damage, it starts off as 10,000 shadow damage every second, and then increases in damage by 10% with every cast. So after 10 seconds, it's going to be doing 100% more damage. So now we're going to take a look at the council members and also their abilities and how you deal with these. So the first council member is Frost King Malik, and his first ability is what your tanks are needed for, as it's a debuff placed on them called Frigid Assault. And this is where he will inflict 75,000 frost damage to the tank, and then each melee attack will apply the Frigid Assault debuff. Now if the tank reaches 15 stacks of the Frigid Assault debuff, then he will be stunned for 15 seconds, so you get our tanks to swap when there are about 10, 12 debuffs. It's just safer really. Now his next ability is called Biting Cold, and this is where he will shroud a player in ice, and it does get a little bit chilly in there, which will then inflict 94,000 frost damage and afflict them with the Biting Cold debuff. Now this will inflict 115,000 frost damage to anyone that is standing within 4 yards for him, and this debuff lasts for 30 seconds, so pretty much if you've got Biting Cold on you, you just need to make sure you've moved out of the raid as soon as possible. And his final ability is called Frostbite, and he will only use this ability when he has been possessed by the Spirit of Garagel. Now this is where he will also shroud a player in ice, however it will inflict 110,000 frost damage, and then it will also put 5 stacks of Frostbite on them. Now, Frostbite will cause the player to inflict 22,000 frost damage per stack to all allies within 4 yards. However, you can reduce the stacks of Frostbite by people stacking up. So we had 2 range to go and stack up on the person that had the Frostbite debuff. It just massively reduces the damage that people are taking. The next council member is called Kasra Gin, and this mob isn't actually tanked, he just runs around freely and then does barrel rolls repeatedly, which can be quite annoying. Now his first ability is the barrel roll, it's called Reckless Charge, and this is where he will target a random player's location and then roll towards them, and then will inflict 90,000 nature damage to anyone that is in that line, and it will also knock anyone back who is standing within 5 yards when he lands. So pretty much move away from the line of doom. It's a very, very clear graphic on the ground. There's no reason for anyone to get hit by it. Just ignore me getting hit by it in the kill video in the background. Thank you. And the second ability he has is called Overload. Now he will only perform Overload when he is possessed by the Spirit of Garagel, and this will cause him to become electrified. He is strong like electric. And he will stun himself for 20 seconds, that's how strong he is, and he will reflect 50% of all the damage he takes as nature damage. Now he will only become overloaded after he has performed a reckless charge. So once he's done the charge, he will be still for 20 seconds and then reflect a lot of damage back at you. The next council member goes by the name of Sul the Sandcrawler, and he is a bit of a pain in the arse really, and we want him dead first, so we'll talk about that in a little bit after we've continued with the abilities. And his first ability goes by the name of Sandbolt, and this is where he will target a random player's location and will inflict 150,000 nature damage to anyone that is standing within 5 yards of the Sandbolt's location. Now this spell is interruptible, and we do recommend that you try and keep it as interrupted as possible, otherwise people are going to be taking quite a lot of damage. Now his second ability is called Quicksand, and this is where he will summon a pool of quicksand at a random player's location and will begin to entrap them. Now Quicksand will inflict 137,000 nature damage every second to all players within 7 yards, and if you are standing within the Quicksand, you will gain the debuff Ensnared. Now this is a stacking debuff, and you will gain a stack of the debuff every second, and this will reduce movement speed by 15% per stack. However, if it reaches 5 stacks, you will become entrapped, and this pretty much means you are snared in the quicksand pool. You're going to be taking damage, and you need to yell for one of your healers to dispel you, as it is a magic effect. And Sul the Sandcrawler's final ability is called Sandstorm. Now he will only cast this ability when he has become possessed by the spirit of Garagel the Spirit Binder, and the Sandstorm will inflict 38,000 nature damage to every player for 8 seconds. Now this is a ticking kind of damage, and it will happen every second, so 8 times 38, it's quite a bit of damage. Now he will also animate all the existing pools of quicksand and will transform them into living sand. Now the living sand mobs will spawn from the quicksand pools, and your tank needs to pick them up pretty fast, because the chances are your healers are going to get aggro on them, and then they're just going to get 2-shot, because they do hurt quite a bit. Now when the living sand dies, it will create a new pool of quicksand at that location, and if the living sands are not killed by the time the next sandstorm is cast, they will be healed to full and increase all their damage done by 100% until they are killed. Now this is also a stacking effect on the living sand. And moving on to the fourth and final council member, who goes by the name of the High Priestess Malik. And she has 4 abilities, 2 of which are interruptible, and again it's recommended that you don't actually interrupt these, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So her first ability is Wrath of the Lower, and this is where she will strike a random player and inflict 140,000 holy damage. We just healed through this, it's not that much damage. And her second ability is called Blessed Lower Spirit, and this is where she will spawn a spirit at her location, and it will move to the council member that has got the lowest health on them at the time being, and if it reaches them, it will heal them for 5% of their health. So you need to get your DPS to swap to the spirits as soon as possible. However, if the spirit is still alive after 20 seconds, it will instantly jump to its target and heal them for the 5%. So you've got 20 seconds to kill off the mob. Now her next ability is called Wrath of the Lower, but it's in its shadow form instead, and she will only cast this when she is possessed by the spirit of Garagel. Now this is where it will strike a random player, inflicting 165,000 shadow damage. Again, we just healed through this. And her second ability is also cast when she is possessed by the spirit of Garagel, and this is a shadowed lower spirit. And this is the same as the blessed lower spirit, however it will fixate on an enemy, so one of your raid members, and it will chase after them. Now if it touches that enemy, it will kill them straight away. Just it deals stupid amounts of damage, there's no way of keeping your player alive. Now again, if it is alive after 20 seconds, it will instantly jump to its target and kill them. So your DPS do need to swap to this as soon as possible. Now when it comes to the fight itself, we decided that the worst council member was actually Sul the Sandcrawler. And we thought, well, we tried several different ways of killing him, but we found the best way to kill him was actually to just nuke him at the very start of the fight. So the video is probably going to restart itself in a second. So just look at how we kill Sul, And what we do is we Bloodlust on the pull, and everybody attacks Saul the Sandcrawler. Tank number 1 picks him up, and also picks up the Frost King Malik, while tank number 2 interrupts Malik, takes her to the side of the room, and then doesn't interrupt anymore. This is useful because it keeps High Priestess Malik out of the way of the raid. She doesn't need to be tanked, and she can just stand there casting her holy damage and be annoying. Also, by doing this, it means that the Blessed Lower Spirit has a further distance to travel if it does spawn, and you do want your Blessed Lower Spirit to be going for Saul the Sandcrawler at the very start of the fight, because he's who you're going to be nuking down. So yeah, we go on to Saul at the very start, we use Bloodlust, and as soon as one of the council members becomes possessed by the Spirit of Garajal, we wait for about 10 seconds because the damage he deals at the start if his dark energy reaches 100% isn't overly taxing on the healers, I guess you could say. So we just make sure that Saul's got decent damage being put on him, but then we get 5 out of the 6 DPS to swap to the council member that is possessed, do 25% of his maximum health as damage, and then swap back to Saul the Sandcrawler and continue to nuke him down. Now, if the damage isn't good enough on the possessed player, the possessed council member, then we get the 6th DPS as well to swap to that council member and leave Saul the Sandcrawler alone. But the general idea is to kill off Saul the Sandcrawler before he casts his Sandstorm ability and animates the sand pools and brings the living sands to life. Once you've killed off Saul the Sandcrawler, the fight becomes a real piece of cake from there onwards, so to speak. And you can pretty much kill off the mobs in any order you want. You could just nuke one down again like you did with Saul the Sandcrawler, or you could just follow the mobs which do become possessed by the Spirit of Garajal. You do need to remember that each mob will gain 10% damage once they have become possessed, and you also need to make sure you don't kill yourself when you're targeting Kasra Gin, as he will reflect 50% damage when he is possessed by Garajal. But yeah, the fight is really simple, and it's just general WoW mechanics really. You don't stand in the quicksand pools of doom and take extra damage. You make sure you kind of spread out with a range of 5 yards, and if you get the debuff on you that's deadly, which is the biting cold, you just move away from the raid, and people stack up on time when you have the frostbite debuff on you. So it's generally based around communication, so you do need to be aware of what's going on as well, and it might seem like a complete and utter clusterfuck at the very start, and it is, to be honest, but it's manageable. And we got there in the end, thankfully. So that's going to do it for this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide. If you are interested in future Throne of Thunder raiding guides, there are quite a few more to come on both normal mode and heroic mode, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel and check out flaskup.com for all your Mr. Pandaria raiding guide needs.